So while we are winning the ideological battle, and while we are winning the support of so many young people and working people throughout the country, I have concluded that this battle for the Democratic nomination will not be successful. And so today, I am announcing the suspension of my campaign. If I believed we had a feasible path to the nomination, I would certainly continue the campaign, but it's just not there. I know that there may be some in our movement who disagree with this decision, who would like us to fight on to the last ballot cast at the Democratic Convention. I understand that position. But as I see the crisis gripping the nation, exacerbated by a president unwilling or unable to provide any kind of credible leadership, and the work that needs to be done to protect people in this most desperate hour, I cannot, in good conscience, continue to mount a campaign that cannot win and which would interfere with the important work required of all of us in this difficult hour. Please stay in this fight with me. Let us go forward together. The struggle continues. Thank you all very much.
So you just saw it there, Bernie Sanders officially ending his 2020 presidential run, saying that he cannot in good conscience continue a run for president when he knows that there is a lot of important work which needs to be done out in the Senate, especially when we're talking about this coronavirus crisis. And Joe Biden has gone on Twitter to, sort of give out a response. He wrote a little article here. I'm going to tell you what I think of it. But here, this is the tweet saying, "I know Bernie well. He's a good man and a great leader and one of the most powerful voices for change in this country. And it's hard to sum up in a single tweet the contributions that he's done to our politics, so I won't try to." And so he wrote up this, or at least someone did. I doubt Joe Biden himself wrote it, but someone wrote this, sort of what we should ultimately mean. And one of the parts that I want to talk about here is he says, "And while Bernie and I may not agree on how we might get there, we agree on the ultimate goal for these issues and many more." Guys, this is one of the things that neoliberals always try to tell us. They say to the left, "We agree with you on your goals. We agree with the things that you want. We just have a different way of getting there." But what you need to understand is that an ideological position is not just a position for policies. It's also a position for how we get to those policies, right? So in the sense, the way in which Bernie Sanders envisions getting to those policies requires taking on the institutions, not just as a necessary means to get to, having a Green New Deal, get to having free college, get to having Medicare for all. Those things are required and those things are true, but also the very fact that we must take a moral stance against corporate money in order to take on the system in some sense, right? Because in a way, guys, neoliberals have a different conception of what constitutes the establishment or what constitutes the system. You'll remember not too long ago, Hillary Clinton came out smearing Bernie Sanders and said something along the lines of, I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but something along the lines of Bernie Sanders is a fraud because, and the reasons that she gave were more or less that Bernie Sanders has been in politics this whole time. And when I read that, it immediately showed me not only just someone who is really, really petty and pitiful, but it also just showed me someone who misunderstood what Bernie Sanders supporters meant when they talked about the establishment. For Hillary Clinton, when we were talking about the establishment, it was specifically the political establishment. So for her, there was a kind of perplexing effect to the idea of how could you say that Bernie Sanders is anti-establishment if he's been in political office? Whereas when sort of Bernie supporters and progressives talk about the establishment, we mean a whole different thing. We're talking about corporate establishment. We're talking about how the very neoliberal, belief that government, the way in which neoliberals think about the interconnections between government and the market, that is part of the establishment. And Hillary Clinton couldn't even really understand that. So it showed me just someone who just didn't understand the movement at all. And so let me also show you another tweet, or not a tweet, but sort of part here at the end of this message here. He says, "And to your supporters, I make the same commitment. I see you, I hear you, and I understand the urgency of what it is that we have to get done here in this country. I hope you will join us. You are more than welcome. You are needed." So, guys, you cannot in good conscience say this if you haven't done any policies. If you tell us, "Oh, we agree with you. We're with you. We really need you. We believe in you. I hear you. I see you," but you're not actually listening to me. You're not actually listening to the policies that I believe in. You're not actually listening to the values that I hold, the things that I want. then you're not listening to me. You're not hearing me. And guys, I was listening to mainstream media. I was on MSNBC to see how they'd try to play this thing. I was wondering whether or not they would try to hit Bernie Sanders on like, oh, you still took too long to get out of the race. I didn't hear that, but what I did hear was they were talking about that message right there, and they were saying, look here at Joe Biden really doing the work to get Bernie Sanders supporters. This is not doing the work. This is nothing. This is not doing the work to get my vote. This is not doing the work to persuade you or me that, hey, we actually should go out and vote for Joe Biden. Because guys, here's the thing. I'm not necessarily like Bernie or bust in the traditional sense. I'm Bernie's policies or bust, if that makes sense, right? Like if Joe Biden turned around and was suddenly like, you know what, I've had a change of heart, Medicare for all, like, okay, I can't quite meet you on canceling student debt, but we can do free college, and like we can sit down, we can have a negotiation, and maybe you can earn my vote. But that's the point. You've got to earn my vote. You have to show me that you actually listen to me by, endorsing or supporting or in some way doing something to get towards those policies, those views, those beliefs that I have. Then we can talk about you earning my vote. But until you do that, telling me nice words, saying that you hear me, that you see me without actually taking any action, that doesn't work. That doesn't count. That is not you earning my vote. That is not what that is. That is just you giving me flowery language, telling me how you really, really care about me, and then running away and not actually listening to me. That's what that is. And Donald Trump actually had a pretty funny here. Anyway, I'll just read this here. Bernie Sanders is out. Thank you to Elizabeth Warren. If not for her, Bernie would have won almost every state on Super Tuesday. This ended just like the Democrats and the DNC wanted. Same as the crooked Hillary fiasco. The Bernie people should come to the Republican Party because of trade. Now, that's an interesting take on this. This is to say that Bernie supporters, since Bernie Sanders is closer on the issue of trade to Donald Trump than Joe Biden is, that Bernie supporters should turn around and support Donald Trump. And this is an interesting debate which we're seeing open up in politics. I mean, even just a few years ago, trade policy wasn't even considered to be, really part of the public discourse. It was really only an elite discourse, only sort of an elite group of people were talking about trade. Now trade has really come into the public mainstream, and it's having an interesting fissure between sort of left and right, where it's not really clear. It seems like there's people on all different sides of the sort of Republican or Democrat side which have different views on trade, and so we're sort of waiting for an alignment to see how those views sort of work themselves out. So we'll have to see. There very well may be some people who supported Bernie Sanders who go over to Donald Trump for the issue of trade for various reasons. Personally, I won't be voting for Donald Trump. I can say that part with absolute certainty that I won't be voting for Donald Trump. And I don't know that Donald Trump on trade has been any better than what Joe Biden would be, at least in terms of the actual policies that he's actually implementing. I mean, his rhetoric maybe, but, in terms of the actual things that he's doing, I haven't quite seen that. And Sagar and Jetty also had a great thing here. I mean, actually, Sagar and Jetty managed to roast Joe Biden by actually quoting the thing that I was talking to you earlier here. Biden, to his Bernie supporters, I see you, I hear you, and I understand the urgency of what it is we have to get done in this country, blah, blah, blah. The thing I read earlier. I love that because it's just roasting Biden by literally just quoting Biden, because it's so obvious that he hasn't actually done anything. Kyle Kulinski here saying, Bernie Sanders supporters back him because of policy. It's that simple. We prioritize things like Medicare for all, free college, ending the wars, Green New Deal, criminal justice reform. Biden's record proves he will prioritize and fight for none of these. Wake up. He is not our friend. I definitely agree with Kyle on that point. I will say, like I was, mentioning earlier, with the connection between policy and the means by which we get to those policies, I might slightly disagree with Kyle. I don't know. I know that I am somewhat to the left of Kyle, but in general, I definitely agree with that point there. So Kyle's response here is basically, everybody, please take your monthly reoccurring donation that you are giving to Bernie and give it to the so he's actually running against Shahid. He's running against Nancy Pelosi. So he's saying that in order to carry on the Bernie Sanders fight against the establishment, we should now support the primary challenger to Nancy Pelosi. This is something that I definitely support, and I probably will be making a bit of a contribution. I think I contributed like $5 like a couple months ago to his campaign. So maybe I will send in a few more bucks to go up against Nancy Pelosi. This is definitely something that I support. I would recommend that you at least consider it. I can't make up your mind for you, but consider it. I would also say, in addition to that, I do think that just sort of me being a bit of a socialist, like as a socialist, I think that we also do need to go a little bit beyond electoral politics. I don't think that we can abandon electoral politics, but I do think that to some extent, if we really want to carry forward the progressive movement, we also need to talk about level sort of grassroots serious organizing that is not only geared towards electoral politics. There needs to be talk about strikes. There needs to be talks about organization. If we're only talking about trying to persuade people in electoral politics, trying to get people into office, I don't think that that's going to work in the long run. That's just my opinion. Maybe you disagree. You can let me know in the comment section below. But I also do think that there does need to be an important aspect for electoral politics, because then sometimes you can create the atmosphere that's necessary for change, but then there's no way to actually vote and implement and sort of keep those policies, keep those things in the long run. You might be able to persuade a couple corporations to, you might even be able to persuade a whole bunch of corporations to make serious changes. But then if there isn't really any kind of policy, sort of glue to that, then what can happen is those gains can oftentimes be lost, and unions can be lost over time as corporations just revert to the same old, same old. So I think you really need both. I think you need to have organizing strikes on the ground. You need to be developing new media platforms, sort of, on YouTube and on other platforms, if you want to move the progressive message forward. And then you also need to be talking about electoral politics and, taking on Nancy Pelosi in office and things like that. So both of those things are really, really important, and I hope that those are things that the progressive movement can do going forward. I know personally, I've been, I'll be continuing making videos here. I hope that I can start a podcast pretty soon. I want to start a podcast specifically trying to interview lefty people like you watching this video, Bernie supporters, trying to figure out what other Bernie supporters think we should do going forward. If that's something that you would be interested in talking to me about, send me a message on Twitter. And we'll see if I can, we can set up something and we can basically just do interviews. I want to interview just regular Bernie supporters and try to figure out what average Bernie supporters think we can do moving forward in order to, bring the progressive movement going forward. If that's something that you might be interested in, find my Twitter handle. It'll be down in the description. Send me a message, and we can try to, if you have any specific or unique ideas, let me know what your ideas would be for how the progressive movement can go forward. If I think it's something unique, something interesting, then I'd love to interview you and get that started. So anyway, if you like this video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thanks.